And today, I am announcing that the Justice Department will ask a federal court in Texas to subject the state of Texas to a pre-clearance regime similar to the one required by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
Wow, we're back. That was, of course, Attorney General Eric Holder. Today, in a speech to the National Urban League up in Philly, Holder declared that he's not going to sit back and take it anymore, announcing that the Justice Department, his Justice Department, is asking a federal court down in San Antonio to require the state of Texas to obtain approval from the Department of Justice in advance before putting future voting changes in place. Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott, who's running for governor now, responded on Twitter saying, "I'll fight Obama's effort to control our elections, and I'll fight against cheating at the ballot box." Well, it's a new front in the war on voting rights since the Supreme Court invalidated a pivotal section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act back in June of this year. Well, the Attorney General is expected to announce a series of challenges to similar laws currently on the books or making their way through state legislatures in other states, signaling that the fight against discriminatory voting laws is not over. Joining me right now is Judith Browne Dianis of the Advancement Project and Wayne Slater, chief political correspondent for the Dallas Morning News. Thank you so much, very much, Wayne and Judith. Judith, you know from the beginning of this thing, I've spotted Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, as overseeing, if not supervising, this multi-state, dozens of states around the country, all with Republican legislatures, some of them in blue states, using their power to screw the black voter out of voting. This is what they've been doing. In many cases, they openly stated they can't get a majority of all the voters, so they said, we'll get the majority of the white voters, and we'll keep the others from voting much.
Right.
It's pretty clear what they're doing. Then along comes the Supreme Court. It's led by conservatives, 5-4, and they say 5-4. By the way, we're getting rid of the Voting Rights Act, which was the main tool to stop this kind of stuff from going on. How do you do it without it?
Well, I mean, Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act allowed the Department of Justice to pre-clear any changes in the law. So now what the Justice Department has said is we're going to step up our efforts. We may not be able to do it that way, but there's other provisions of the Voting Rights Act that stop discrimination. And so they're doing their job. They're not doing
Can he ask a guy down in Texas or a Texas judge, male or female, to do what he wants? Will they do it?
Yes. Well, actually, in this particular case, in a redistricting sense, for example, the court already found there was discrimination in Texas in redistricting. So now they can go back to the court and say, you found discrimination, so court, we need you to make sure that they don't continue their action.
Wayne, there's been an old trick. It's been perverse. The perverse use of the Voting Rights Act when it existed by the Republicans. What they did all over the South is erase white Democratic Congress people, or as many Democratic Congress people as they could erase, by flooding the zone, taking all the minority voters they could get in a state, jamming them into one district, let that district go 90-10 Democrat. Meanwhile, they gobbled up 2 or 3 other seats, 55-45 or 60-40. They generally rationed out the votes so that they could get 3 out of 4 congressional seats when they only deserve maybe less than 2. And now they're doing it down in Texas. They've apparently flooded the zone of one district with all Hispanic voters and grabbed the other 3 for themselves. This is a pattern.
That is exactly what happened, and that's why the federal court panel said that the lines drawn by the Republican legislature were discriminatory. If you look at the growth in population in Texas over the last decade, 80% of it was Hispanic, and we have 4 new additional congressional seats. But as you said, only one of those actually went to a minority opportunity district. The other 3 went to safe Republican districts. So it was a prima facie case that the state of Texas, the Republican legislature, and the district lines that they drew were discriminatory by doing exactly as you said. You put the minorities, pack them in some districts, and you maximize the opportunity for the white majority in the state, bare majority in the state, but you deny the rights of a whole lot of people. And the same thing is happening, of course, with the issue of photo ID. It's another effort to sort of restrict the votes in Texas. All of that is under litigation in Texas.
What about this guy down there, the Attorney General running for governor, saying assuming there's been some kind of corruption down there, vote stealing, therefore he has to have these new laws. I do find that, look, there's some vote stealing, obviously, in the country, different places, but nobody ever seems to be able to find it.
Right.
Why not? And it certainly isn't in bulk volume, because if there was bulk volume stealing, they would get it. But they never seem to need, in Pennsylvania as well, they never seem to need to show up with any evidence of criminality to change the law.
That's right. I mean, Advancement Project's in trial right now as we speak in Pennsylvania. We have no evidence of voter fraud by the other side. The same thing in Texas. But then they tell people you need an ID indeed to prevent voter fraud. But what we know is that it's about making it harder to vote for African Americans and Latino voters. In Texas, they're the poster child for voter suppression. And so the Department of Justice has decided that they were going to do what they had to do to enforce the law. This is nothing new. It's a provision of the Voting Rights Act, and we're glad the Attorney General is doing his job.
Let me ask you a question, Wayne, about your state down there. Is that state getting more diverse and perhaps more purple than red?
Well, of course it is. I mean, you could tell by the growth in Hispanic population. Hispanics, of course, disproportionately vote Democratic. It is more Hispanic, more minority. It's moving toward Democrats, but it's still a solidly Republican state. And it's run at this point by elected officials who are all Republicans at the statewide level.
We're seeing that right now in this voting rights scam. Anyway, thank you, Judith Browne Dianis and Wayne Slater, as always. When we return.